Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Infopedia, the world's only information podcast. I'm your co-host, Crage2.
I'm Frankie.
And I'm T-Fed. Before this episode begins, I would like to thank Congressman Lou Suile for his generous donation to the Infopedia Fund.
In the amount of $500,000, we can finally get the podcast village going.
We can get so the wonderful thing about the podcast village is that we will have over 100 podcasters in one room. It is a large warehouse type event center where there is no walls, which is an added feature that prevents people from experiencing privacy.
It's better for the acoustics, is what I've heard as well. No walls equals no bouncing around. Thank you again, Congressperson Lou Suile for Congress. That's vote for Lou Suile. Congress.
Ready for Congress, it's Lou Suile.
I'm ready for Congress. Are you? That's his...
What he's always been saying is all about that kind of Congress shit. He's on the Congress type beat right now. Damn, you never know what he's going to talk about. He's always saying shit like, hey, I think we should have more government. And I said, I don't think there's enough to go around as it is. So I think that that's a great postulate.
What is your guys' favorite thing about Lou Suile?
Well, my favorite thing is that he's into all kinds of Congress. He's into, like, the normal kind. He's into the sexual kind, which is kind of brave because you don't see that a lot. Because he's, like, he does porn on the side, but then he also, like, makes bills and laws and makes stuff.
He's very out with it, too. Usually it would be kind of scandalous for a congressperson to be a porn star, but... I find it very brave that he's able to come out with that.
I thought it was really brave of him. He came out as the world's first straight porn star in which he, as an adult man, has sex with an adult female woman. And I've never seen anyone do that before, just plain old, just period. So I'm ready for more of that kind of stuff happening in the federal government, if I can figure it out how the rest of the world works sooner than later.
I think my favorite thing that he's done for this great nation of ours is his very generous donation of 100 puppies to his wife and children.
And you might think that that's a lot of puppies to take care of, but in reality, it's almost not enough because, as we all know, one puppy equals one dopamine, and we need at least 300 dopamine a day to carry on.
I was a little bit disappointed, though, because in his public statement regarding the puppy acquisition merger, he did not explain how he was planning to fund the puppies' eventual extermination when they become of an age where they're no longer cute, which might create a situation in which adult dogs are allowed to live, which, quite frankly, I think is just sort of an affront to our American sensibilities and our values. But I'm sure that because he's a real smart guy, he can kind of like pull some strings and make it happen. But in the future, if we're going to accept any donations from people, they need to have like the gag order, like they have to get that sorted out.
I mean, he gave us $500,000.
Right,
yeah, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, but how long? I mean, that's gonna like a couple nights that of like debauchery, and then we're back to square zero. And our patrons are, by the way, I thank you everyone who's donated on the Patreon. We're almost at $750,000 a day, but the unfortunate reality is it's not enough. If you have any amount of money that you're not using, if it's in your bank account, if it's in the seat cushions of your car,
your tax return,
even listen, just tell your employer not to do any tax withholdings, and then give it all to us.
If you have any children and you give them a daily allowance, they don't need it. They can get their own jobs.
Get your wife pregnant with another child and accelerate their lifespan using performance enhancing drugs so they can get a job so that you can give us more money, please.
Thank you to Lou Suile for sponsoring this episode.
On to the show. So, Frankie, what is our topic for today's episode?
Speaking of politicians, the topic for today, and we are about to talk about the topic of the day, which is the assassination of John F. Kennedy. on November 22nd, 1963.
Were you guys around in
Yes. I was almost there.
You were almost. What do you mean?
I was on my way, but I didn't get there in time.
Your mom was
I'm sorry. Wait.
pregnant with you? And
No, I was going to where he was gonna be.
That was a long. How old are you?
What doesn't matter is how old as I am.
You sound great for someone who's at least 80?
Well, it's not
90 maybe?
I took a break. It wasn't all. I wasn't just living the whole time. I mean, that's fucking stupid. There was nothing good happening for like a long time. Like when I saw the Atari, I'm like, okay, this fucking sucks. Snooze. Let me know when Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 comes out.
Oh, so it was like kind of like a click situation.
It was. Yeah, but in that he's skipping his life. It was more like a future situation where I was. Except the thing is, people are like, oh, you gotta like, if you freeze a person, then they'll stop aging. But you know what they don't say is that if you heat up a person, they age even faster. So I would just decided that like I could just like cycle back around, right? Like
You horseshoed it.
I horseshoed it.
That's fascinating.
I guess it's pretty standard for me, but for you, I guess it's a little different.
Oh, I forgot to mention, this is the first episode that we are going to have a special guest. Stay tuned for later in the episode where we have Professor Shmo Logan interview someone who was really there, our first ever guest, Scrooge McFarnsworth.
So the issue with the Jeffrey Ronald Kennedy assassination was that almost everyone knew was going to happen. It was like so telegraphed. It was almost embarrassing for the average person at the time period. Why don't you tell me a little bit more about how it was broadcast so publicly and how everyone just kind of knew it was going to happen, like in the public zeitgeist?
You know, it's unbelievable to me that the entire public, all of the United States were told via broadcast radio and television that the president would be assassinated at this date on this time, and somehow no one was able to stop it. It's as if they all wanted it to happen. I mean, it is true that he was a very unpopular president, but you'd imagine, if he was made president, there's got to be a few supporters, right?
Yeah. I think it was really interesting, and nobody talks about this, that basically in Dallas on that day, they were handing out AK-47s to pretty much every single member of the, I guess you could call a motorcade audience an audience, basically just kind of at the ready. And I think people thought that they were fake, they were not loaded, they were almost like a party favor.
Yeah, it's kind of like a joke assassination. I think many people didn't take it seriously, mainly because, obviously if they broadcast that someone is going to assassinate you and you go anyway to the place where they're going to assassinate you, either you think that you're, hot and then you're not going to drop, or it's not real and it's just staged. Or and this is my personal theory, I think it was a kind of a bit of a surprise party sort of situation where he was not given information in advance like we were. And when you think about it, most conspiracy theories hinge on the idea that a couple of people know something and they're able to keep it a secret from everyone else. This is sort of a reverse conspiracy theory where one person was kept in the dark and everyone else knew, which is ultimately way easier to maintain if you think about it. Because how many people do you have to not tell? Just one guy. So that's a lot. There's so many things I don't even know about because I just never looked it up. Is that a conspiracy? No, I'm just stupid. So maybe that was the biggest issue that we had with that president.
I wouldn't sell yourself so
Don't say that about yourself.
Hey, that's my friend Craze 2 we're talking about.
So the amazing thing about this whole conspiracy, assassination, this whole debacle is that Randy Suile, the grandfather of Lou Suile, was actually the not headmaster, what's the word?
Like a grand marshal?
Grand marshal.
Grand marshal? I was thinking more like puppeteer.
Oh.
So the puppet master.
The puppet master.
Oh, okay.
The puppet master who sort of pulled the strings on this whole thing.
How old were you when your parents first showed you the assassination footage. For me, I was about 7 years old, and I remember it very distinctly because at that time period, I had never watched the light of someone's human life be extinguished on camera before. I worked at, my father was an executioner at Felromston State Prison, and he often brought me to Bring Your Daughter to Execution Day. And I was able to see many people cooked alive for crimes that generally people don't agree on whether or not they were actually committed. So I was sort of used to the idea of disposing of the human waste in our society. But when I watched the video, it was very concerning to me because I had never seen someone who was worth anything and loved by anyone die. And in fact, at that point, I wasn't even sure that people who were worth anything could die.
That's fascinating. So not only had you never been exposed to, as we all have throughout our lives, the actual assassination tapes, you were unaware of the concept of mortality for people who had love and life and laughter.
Yeah, and in my mind, the way it was explained to me is that there are two categories of human beings. There's the fakies, who are the people who you see walking around, and then there's the realies, and that's like mom and dad and the president of the United States, and me if I'm a good little man. So it was shocking to me because I thought that the cycle of death and rebirth was only privy to those who had the proper karmic realignment stage occur to them. But when I found out that almost everyone will die, it was really shocking to me, and I think the American public, many people who were brought up in my generation, felt the same way.
What I want to know is what were some of the contributing factors in John F. Kennedy's presidency that made him A, so unliked, and B, to the point where every single American citizen was aware that he would be assassinated on that fateful Dallas morning.
But let's go back to let's go back to the presidential race, because it was a very famous presidential race between John F. Kennedy and Lawrence L. Lincoln, creator of LL Bean.
One of the things that made this race really stand out was it was the first time in presidential history where instead of using a democratic voting type system, the race was interpreted literally and was an actual foot race between three individuals to see who was the fastest. It was during a time period when physical fitness was at its highest demand, and put frankly, no one was willing to elect a president who was a bit of a slouch, right? We had presidents who, later in their life were, a little bit, were not fast enough, and that created a lot
McKinley.
Okay, well, let's not point names at fingers here because we have a lot of ground to cover here, but in any case, I've always found it fascinating that despite the fact that none of the presidents actually were able to move their bodies on their own due to the respiratory illness that was plaguing the nation at the time, they still managed to find a way to make a crawling-induced type of race for old, strange men to compete for the most powerful seat of power in the government.
Did you say that it was a competition between three candidates?
It was the first three parties. Well, so the way that it works is that oftentimes when a president is on the, he's not doing so hot, he'll make another fake competitor to sort of even it out.
Like a clone?
In this case, yes.
I'm sorry, I kind of lost track. What is this? Did JFK have a clone, or was this LL Bean?
I'm not sure how it can be lost. Track can be lost in a situation where we're dealing with factual evidence. But LL Bean was definitely a clone of James Francis Kennedy. So in this situation, we had an inordinate amount of people who were vying for the presidential seat. And in fact, it was the first ever election in which every single human being on planet Earth at the time who was known by a name was on a ballot. And these ballots were so long that actually we had to deforest every tree we had available in the United States, and we only reached about half of the people that we needed to vote. So that's when we knew it was time to do a voting process that kind of did away with the need for a democratic system.
That's fascinating. I remember a time when all my grandparents would talk about at Thanksgiving was Jacob Frankel Kennedy and just how unpopular his presidency was, even though he did win that foot race. If you can recall in a previous episode about Brendan Urie and his murder, he was a big fan of dip. Well, guess what? Jacob Frankel Kennedy was a terrible opponent of dip. He had money in the vape industry, and so he had a lot of stock in the falling of tobacco and dip, as it were. So he did basically create a second prohibition with dip, which angered, of course, Gregory Almost, Francis Space, and every single member of Panic at the Disco, that's for sure. Because they, for a while, as you remember, had a dip-based form of art. So this was his probably most unpopular move as a president and as a fairly young man as well. It was kind of a shocking turn of events that will never be forgotten, and of course contributed to the public outcry that followed and soon led to his fateful death.
Not to know about you, but the dip phase of the Panic at the Disco Codeville group, that phase was kind of out of style by the 40s, and we're talking the 50s, so...
Sure, but while the music had changed from the... If I might know, but rebuttal, while the Codeville genre was dying, the fact of the matter is that dip was highly addictive, and so people were still, of course, chomping hither and thither down at the bit of dip.
But I think that one of the factors that people don't really take into account with the great dip wars of the 1950s is that many people were dying because of contaminated dip, which was a byproduct of a overall lack of regulation in that industry that was brought on by the previous presidential campaign fronted by Larmick McTonaldson. This was a very popular policy among people who were in the anti-regulation and pro-monopoly fund. Many groups of lobbyists who were taking donations from the average consumers in a very interesting act of working class solidarity, because in the preceding era there had been so many regulations in the dip and overall tobacco industry that many people were not able to access the nicotine they needed to get through their everyday lives. And as we all know, that nicotine is, some people would describe it as an addictive substance, but in reality, nicotine is an important nutrient for the American mind, and without it, it's almost impossible to function.
I think we're getting a bit off topic here.
Look, all this talk of dip has got me hungry. Now, back to Thanksgiving. JFK was a huge proponent of Thanksgiving. He was extremely into colonial behaviors. He was often caught sneaking into his neighbors' houses and essentially squat guerrilla living inside of them.
I'm aware of guerrilla warfare, and I'm aware of the concept of squatting, but could you elaborate a little bit more on guerrilla squatting or squat guerrillaing?
I think they meant that he was squatting like a gorilla.
That's exactly right. When he would be caught, in almost every single case, before he was obviously shooed away like a stray cat, he was seen squatting much like a gorilla would in his leisurely time. He was a big fan of just sitting around, and he would do so in such a way that was extremely invasive to his neighbors. He would borrow their toothbrushes. He would sleep with their wives, including Marilyn Monroe, of course. And that just made him unpopular on an interpersonal level, not even to mention on a political level.
I'm sorry, I'm losing track of the timeline. So you're saying that that this happened, was this happening during the presidency or before the presidential race?
Oh, this was fully during the presidency. In between signing bills, vetoing other bills, and making sure that the second dip prohibition was alive and well, he was pretty much every night caught at a different residence, and police had to be called, such that they created actually a subset of the police state in Washington, D.C. that was specifically designed to receive calls in which neighbors would catch JFK in the act of invasive living and just a lot of colonial behavior.
But one of the things I think that is less talked about this behavior is that, you know, in the general historical record and in the minds of most Americans, JFK was responsible for doing very strange colonial behavior, including guerrilla squatting. However, many people were engaged in similar behavior at all strata of class and in gender, and the intersection of all these people created a sort of political movement that he was a part of, which was known as the Guerrilla Front. And this was what enabled them to create the three-party crawling around race, which eventually led to JFK's presidency and his inauguration. And I think furthermore, if we kind of take a cultural look at why that was happening at the time, you'll find that there was, in general, people didn't want to build as many houses anymore. So we had more people than we had houses. And as a result, we had people sort of just run around on the street, and we needed more places to go. And so it's natural that squatting took a sleeper hold on the sort of ways that you can do a crime by just being in a place.
So let's move on to the assassination.
Now, what was JFK doing in Dallas that day? What was his plan for the day? If I remember correctly, there was some kind of speech that he was making to the American people that was obviously broadcast on television. Tifa, do you know anything about why he was there in Dallas that day?
Yes, that was during his famous sort of cross-country road trip of speeches he was making to promote the use of schools in cities and towns for educational purposes, to kind of teach subjects such as arithmetic, math, adding, subtracting, division.
City planning, too, if I remember correctly.
City planning, yeah, that was a popular one. But he was just on a sort of round trip of trying to convince the American people that education is a thing that people need, which many people aren't convinced of to this day still.
I think that's, yes, on the surface level, he was on a tour doing speeches regarding education. But I think that this was a little bit of like the dry mass media press sort of reasoning for this. JFK, as we all know, was addicted to ice cream. And many educational facilities were being repurposed as ice cream manufacturing facilities featuring child labor. And a part of the reason why he was on this trip was sort of a form of guerrilla warfare in which he would explain the concepts of arithmetic, the concepts of city planning, and with the intention of making the children realize this is boring. No one would ever want to do this. It was a little bit of reverse psychology.
I always thought the city planning course was kind of fun.
Well, that's possible now that we've had the post-assassination world in which people realized, oh, well, maybe we should have taken what he was saying seriously, which is a sort of a sad kind of situation when someone is being sarcastic and then after their death, the things that they've said have been interpreted as being literal. It's really, as a bit-based president, it seems sort of unfortunate that we remember him by what he actually said rather than like the fun jokes that he wanted to do.
It's funny that you mention like kind of the surface level fiction that the media was purporting and the kind of underlying reality of the ice cream takeover. It's funny because JFK had his hands in a lot of different secret goings on, like he was obviously president during MK Ultra, which we all know was the secret ice cream flavor he was developing in order to mind control people to be the best spies in the world.
MK Ultra was my favorite Mario Kart game, by the way.
It's also one of my favorite bands of all time. MK Ultra in 1967 released their first single, "Time to Wave a Nice Little Flag." And as a patriot myself, I've always thought it was just ridiculous how you could make something that was so subversive and brave and yet so patriotic and myopic. And overall, it seems like the state of the music industry at that time period was truly a reflection of the times.
So who was the assassin? How was this planned out, and how was it carried out?
The general consensus, and jury's still out on this, and that's why there are so many conspiracy theories. You know, people spend a large portion of their daily life thinking about what actually happened on the grassy knoll. As far as I understand it, and as the general consensus is concerned, there was a motorcade which was going to lead him to the place where he would deliver the mathematics, arithmetic, adding, subtracting, and city planning speech for the children of Dallas and everywhere. However, he didn't exactly make it that far. People always talk about the grassy knoll. That was one of the possible areas by which an assassination, basically the weapon used for the assassination, could have been positioned at. Now, there was the grassy knoll, right? And then there was a hotel across the way, catty corner to be exact, from the grassy knoll, that it is believed that a gentleman by the name of Free Carsey Honwald, who had some kind of gun that he seemed to have built from I think it was like
spare wood, toy trains,
springs,
gadgets, and gizmos galore.
Who thingamabobs. I've got plenty. So anyway, not
anymore.
Which is actually so funny, because you would never think that this would work, which is one of the reasons why, again, there are so many conspiracies. One of the arguing theories is that no way could a gun of wood, springs, and baubles actually kill the almighty president of the United States. And I believe that there's something to that. I'm not sure that a gun made of who's its and what's its galore could actually fully steal the life from a man.
And I believe that's actually why there was a second theory that has been circulated, which I think is partially been perpetuated by the anti-dairy industry. But another reading of the situation was that during the time when JFK was assassinated, Jerome was eating an ice cream cone. And many people believe that although it appeared that there was several gunshots and a sort of, I guess the polite way to say it was an explosion of the face, many people believe that the ice cream itself was the cause of this.
That's funny that you mentioned that, because I remember the first time that I watched the footage as a child that I could remember distinctly Jackie O, because she was seated next to him at the time, kind of touching his deflated head and licking it and saying, raspberry. So I always wondered what that was about. Could it be that JFK was so full of ice cream at the time that, you know, he simply spontaneously combusted, and that maybe nobody was at fault but himself and his devious love?
So, my own personal theory, well, it's not personal. I didn't come up with this. This idea has been in circulation for years and years now, but I think a very compelling argument to his assassination and how it was carried out was that he simply tripped. And I know it, when you first hear it, it doesn't make sense, right? He was in a car, right? How could he trip while in a car? Well, he was actually standing up partially during his joyride down a flimsy way. And at one point he was standing, and then the next he was laying down. To me, that kind of feels like a trip.
The issue I have with the tripping hypothesis, which has actually a lot of momentum in the alternative knowledge community, is that in order to trip in general, you must be in motion. And although he was driving, the legs that he has on his body weren't the primary means of locomotion at the time when the big explosion caused him to no longer be alive.
There are just too many theories about what actually happened. But one thing is for sure, JFK did die on that day. And for that, we're all very thankful.
One of the most blessed moments in American history that awful, awful man, Jacob Ferdinand Kafka, was taken from our world. And many would speculate that if he had remained president for even one more day, we would have never seen the sunrise in 2023.
That's right. He did plan a space mission to the sun in which he was going to attempt to personally exterminate the light because I guess he just didn't like the sun. He never really gave a reason.
Well,
Many don't.
His Irish skin couldn't handle it.
Well, neither can any of... Well, I can, but maybe not the weaker among us.
Oh.
I had heard that the reason for his assassination, one of the possible reasons, and there is quite a lot of information to back this up, is actually that the he wanted to blot out the sun. Again, one of the reasons behind this assassination, one of the motivations was that JFK did want to blot out the sun, create a world of endless night from which there was no escape. And frankly, the American people weren't having that, especially General Motors, who wanted to create a Dyson sphere. And obviously, if there's no sun, there's no star from which to harvest energy. While they both kind of wanted to create a world of endless night, they wanted to go about it in different ways and for different reasons. One increasingly more altruistic than the other.
Which it's so sad because in the end, when we study politics, we all realize that at the end of the day, many people want the same things. We all want the same outcome of peace and darkness. And it's just a matter of how we get there. And I think if there's one takeaway from the JFK assassination, it is that we all are one political class. We all have one thing we want.
We can speculate all we want, but why don't we go shift over now to an interview with our new correspondent who is about to interview someone who was really there. A man named Scrooge McFarnsworth.
Scrooge, it's great to see you. And Joe, I'll let you take it from here.
Welcome to the show, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me on this program. I'm sure it will be syndicated across all broadcast channels and all American homes.
Hey, Scrooge buddy, what's up?
Hello, John Diss.
Yeah, it's John Diss.
Enchanted. Pleasure to make your acquaintance.
You take supplements?
I've been known to take a few supplements in my day.
That's great. Buddy of mine takes supplements.
Is this buddy of yours perhaps yourself?
Yeah.
Now, pretend, what kind of supplements are we talking here? Are they FDA approved? Are they new or hot on the market? Or?
Oh yeah, it's a new supplement. It's great for bodybuilding. E3, B9, 27-D.
Oh, what I wouldn't give to B9 again. Tell me, does it let you go back to a simpler time?
It does. It makes me younger. I was banned from the Little Tykes Bodybuilding Championship. They kept telling me that I'm too old to compete. It's only for ages 9 to 12. But after taking this supplement, I'm able to compete again. I'm at the peak of my physical fitness.
My dear boy, that's brilliant. How can I obtain such a substance?
You can order them online through my website. Here's the link. https www.johndiss.com/supplement/Infopedia/John Diss.
All right, well, I'll be sure to take that and feel the warm sunshine of my youth once more.
So tell me about John. Tell me about JFK.
Yes, John was a close personal friend of mine. I might add, not a lot of people believe me, but there is photographs, there is footage.
That's interesting. You know, a buddy of mine does footage for weddings, events, birthday parties, stuff like that. He says, it's a really good trade to get into nowadays.
It's always been a good trade. I mean, there's feet everywhere. Is there something wrong?
No, I'm just sweating.
It's quite stuffy in here.
So, you were there in 1963.
That's correct. I was there when I saw the whole thing with my own two eyes from a hotel right across the way.
And which hotel would that be?
It was called the Catty Corner Hotel and Inn and Pub and Bar.
Oh, so you like to go to pubs?
My dear boy, I'd love to go to pubs. I'd live in one if I could.
That's interesting.
Well, is it really?
That's interesting.
Well, thank you. Anyway, I was cleaning my gun I had made from bits and bobbles. Who's it and what it's galore. And spring did get loose, but I quickly picked it up and placed it back where it belonged. A design I had come up with 10 years prior and tested it out personally on several neighborhood hamsters.
That's interesting. So where were you at the time of JFK's passing?
Well, like I said, I was posted up, as the youths say, at the Catty Corner Hotel, Pub, Bar and Inn. I had a very clear view of the motorcade as it passed through Flimsy Street onto the place where they would then deliver, of course, the world-famous speech that never occurred. I remember his beautiful hair shining in the wind, and I remember the sound of a gunshot coming from the very room I was staying in. Funny.
That's really interesting. So you have a new book coming out about the events of that day.
Yes, it's called How I Did It. The story of the extermination of my long-lost friend, John F. Kennedy. Subtitle, A Heartwarming Tale of a Man Finding Himself and Losing Quite a Many Few Hamsters in the process.
That's interesting.
But you can only get a copy of this by praying to the Christian God. You must include in your prayer your address and a small sum of $35 for a hard cover and $25 for a soft cover. You must do so approximately between the hours of 11 p.m. and the witching hour, which we all know is midnight. You will then receive the book post-haste under your pillow as you wake the next morning. Curious.
That's interesting.
Well, I'd like to think so. I thought to my publishers, this will never work, but I tried it myself, and wouldn't you know? Oh, they're coming to take me away. Oh, before I go, I must say, you are the most advanced AI that I've ever come across.
That's interesting.
Thank you for having me on this program, and remember to pray to the Christian God tonight. Get your copy.
A truly illuminating interview. To all our listeners, I'd like to thank you for your continued donations to our podcast. If you'd like to donate additional money, make sure that you give it to us, please.
And thank you again to our sponsor, Lou Suile, for his generous donation of $510,000. We still didn't get the additional 10,000, but that's okay, I'm sure.
You're getting there.
So, does anyone else have any final thoughts about the assassination before we move on to listener mail?
I've spoken my piece, I believe.
What else is there to say? It was an event that delighted all of us.
I am so glad that I'm so glad that I'm okay, sorry.
I think it's time, the classic time from our podcast in which it's time to listen to
A little segment we like to call People Who Wrote Us Letters That We're Gonna Read Now.
I'll give us the first letter here. So, all right, cool. We are getting, wow, these are such wonderful letters. So this letter comes from AJ, who is from North New Brunswick, and AJ asks, "Hello, Info Crew. I have been wondering, since the last episode, I noticed that at about the 30-minute mark, there was a slight pause when you were describing the nature of Brendan Urie's fish love. And I just wanted to say I was highly offended by this comment, and I would like to get your input and see if you have anything that you can say to defend yourself against this kind of slanderous accusation. Sincerely, but on thin ice with you, AJ."
Well, you win some and you lose some. I personally, I was never able to stand that song. I think it's bad, and that's some people. I think you just, and I just think you kind of just have to deal with it. If that's okay with you. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So the thing is, one of the issues that we have as informationists is that what we say doesn't necessarily have to conform to what modern scholars would call like a historical canon. And so many of the things that we say on this podcast would otherwise be classified as opinion, but in the circumstances that we have what's known as telepathic primary source privilege, or T. There's a fun acronym for that one as well. But to answer your question, if we have any alternate takes on this, the answer is yes. But the issue is that no, we can't return to the past in which you have a better option that you like more. My suggestion to you would be to start your own podcast if you think that you know more about us, because clearly you don't know very much at all.
Thanks, AJ.
Okay. I got one here from it says it's just signed The Cowboy. This says, "Yeehaw." So I guess this guy's kind of like thinks he's a cowboy or something. Well, howdy doodle, y'all. I'm just your regular Midwest cowboy here, and I just found out about Infopedia this week, and I just binge listened to all of your episodes. Oh, that's very kind, The Cowboy. Well, it'd be nice if you wrote more.
Yeah, I just like to comment that we get a lot of letters, like fan mail, people call it, where they say, I love your show, keep up with the good work. We're not interested in this. Don't talk to us about how much you like us. This is a de facto, we know. I
appreciate it a little bit. It kind of helps me feel a little bit better. But there wasn't a question included, and usually that's a little bit. It's okay. It's okay. I appreciate it.
But wouldn't you agree that maybe instead of just writing us a letter, which first of all doesn't earn us any capital, you could just send us your money. This is a much clearer indication, not only of that you like us, but of how much.
Yeah, I mean, there's no pressure to send money, but we do need it to live and survive, and to construct our Temple of Hope in Podcast City.
I think we have time for one more letter. Let's get a good one going here. Ah, yes. This one's from Gay Baby from Saratoga, Michigan. She say, "Hey guys, have you seen my hamster recently? He's about 80 years old, but I haven't seen him in a while. And I'm starting to get really nervous because this kind of old guy came around with a funny voice, and he had like this gun looking thing, and he said like, "Oh, can I borrow your hamster?"
Dude. I have that. I have your hamster. He's right here with me right now. But so that's very convenient. I'm glad you sent me that letter, because I was about to put him in the washing machine to get him all nice and clean. But I guess can I see the letter here?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we have the full street address. That's going to be 42 Nice. That's going to be 42.
42 March Street.
I'm having a hard time reading the letters here.
That's 42 Me Street and Kapalopolis and JS.
Saratoga, Michigan.
So, and your full name is
Gay Baby.
Gay Baby. That's clearly not real. But in any case, if you want your hamster, I'm afraid that airmail won't really suffice. I might have lied earlier. You're gonna have to come pick it up. So when the podcast village is complete, you can just kind of stroll in. We'll give you a press badge.
Yep.
It is required that you do some amount of labor if you enter Podcast Village. So just be mindful that you may have to set aside a weekend or two, or maybe a month, if time permits. But besides that, no, your hamster is safe, and I think I saw the hamster actually just in the. I think I saw the hamster in the coffee room making a little cup of coffee.
And I believe with this, we've concluded today's episode. I hope that all of you has found it as informative as I have. Signing off for the day, I'm Crage 2.
I'm Frankie.
And I'm T-Fed. And thank you to our special guest, or our special guest interviewer once again.
John Diss, thank you. That was really interesting.
All right, bye. Stay info.